Wow.
You got a bunch of people here, Dana?
Yeah.
Well,
Gee.
hey.
People I actually know too.
Oh,
Cool.
isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Just, they're here. I know somebody. Yeah, if you're just all coming in, everybody's letting in people, you know, that were in the waiting room, and then the Barbara Hood from 49 Writers is going to say a little something when we're all sort of settled. Technically
Are we good?
in the Zoom living room here.
Well, I think we're almost there. So my name is Barbara Hood. I'm with 49 Writers, and we are delighted this evening to welcome two writers, Alaskan writers, who really don't need an introduction, but we're thrilled they're here. Heather Lenday is our current state writer laureate, has been for the last year, and she's got the energy and the drive that has helped all of us appreciate not only that role, but her contributions this year have been great. And specifically to 49 Writers, this is the second inspiration program that she has hosted, and we hope that she will do more throughout the year. And also with Heather tonight, of course, is Dana Stabenow, who we all know and have appreciated for over 3 decades. I know I have, for her work, not only for the wonderful books she writes, but for the inspiration she gives to all of us. So we're happy they're here tonight. We do have other programs, but I don't want to take away time to go through them. So I urge you to check out our website, 49writers.org/events. We have lots of events coming up, including a reading on Thursday from Joan Nockels-Wilson from the Book of Timothy. So without further ado, I just welcome Heather and Dana and thank them so much for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Barbara. Well, yeah, I mean, it seems a little weird that like I'm the writer laureate and I've written 4 books and Dana's written like 30 and she isn't. And I don't get a little like laurel wreath, but I do get to talk to people like Dana, or I've actually also been moderating something for Alaska Quarterly Review for the last year, and I've gotten to meet like incredible poets and writers that otherwise I never would have been able to. So there's that, and I really enjoy these conversations with people, and I really want to give Dana the introduction that I think she's due, and I'm really pleased to introduce her and maybe to remind you of a writing rock star in our midst. Dana was born in Anchorage. She was raised by a single mother on a 75-foot fish tender. She earned a BA in journalism from the University of Alaska and an MFA from my alma mater, the UAA MFA program. And since 1990, she has written, and I think I got this right, I may be off one count because I'm counting on the lists, 30 novels, including 4 series. They're 20 in her Kate Shugak series. I think maybe another one is coming, Dana. Trooper Liam Campbell also gets his own series. There's Star Svensdottir, the science fiction series. And now she is deep into ancient Egypt in the Eye of Isis series. And most recently this year, she just published a Disappearance of a Scribe, which Publishers Weekly raves about, saying, quote, Stabenow brings Alexandra's Hellenistic period to life while demonstrating that murder, methodical detective work, and politically expedient resolutions that fall short of justice are nothing new under the sun, and that she is as much at home in ancient Egypt as she is in the Alaskan wilderness. Not only that, her many awards and honors include national, state, and local accolades, which I always love that. Dana's very Alaskan and very local, but also very well known beyond the 49th state, including an Edgar Award for A Cold Day for Murder. She's got a YWCA Women of Achievement Award, and she got that way back in 2001 when there were a lot more choices. They're narrowing down now. So she was one of the early recipients of that. Also a Governor's Award for Arts and Humanities, a UAA Alumni Award, a Nero Award for fans of Rex Stout for Though Not Dead, and a Homer Arts Council Award for an Artist of the Year. So wide group. Also an award from the Southern Peninsula Haven House for Women of Distinction. And then, as Barbara indicated, there's her whole other life as a philanthropist, a supporter of the arts, a supporter of women with her women's writing retreat that she founded in Homer, Story Knife, which could have a program dedicated to that too. So I will say,
happy to do that anytime, Heather.
good. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a big one, Dana. And but I also wanted to say, I met you in a long time ago at the Kachemak Bay Writers Conference, and this was before I'd written like a book, and I was a columnist at the Daily News, and I was all excited. And I went to you were giving a workshop on how to write a book, like what do you do to write a book. And I think like you scared the wits out of everybody in the room because we're all sat there going, hey, we're going to write a book. And you're like, you get the contract and then you got to write it. You got 60,000 words. You got 6 months. You don't do it, you got to give the money back. We're all just like, what? And it's like, doesn't matter if you're sick, if you're well, if you're feeling it or not, you got to turn in those pages, kids. And we were just like, oh. But when I finally did get a book contract, I've kept that in the back of my head all the time, and I just remember your advice on that. Do what you say you're going to do. Make the deadlines. Turn it in. Listen to your editor. And a lot of that really influenced what I have done. Obviously, not at the same level as you have, because I can't work as hard. I don't think you've got to be the most hardest working writer I know. But anyway, I appreciated that advice, and it was just funny. The room full of, we were all idealistic and thought writing was more creativity, and you were like, get to work. So what I wanted to ask you first, Dana, if it's okay, just a question, is my grandchildren do this thing. They sit around the dinner table, and every day, I love this, they do pits and peaks. In other words, what was the pits, was the worst part of your day or your vacation or wherever it is they've just done, and then the peaks. And I was wondering for you, I thought, I'm really curious to know, just in your long, successful career, what are your personal sort of pits and peaks, if you have any? I bet you do.
Everybody has pits and peaks. Pits are almost all at the beginning. When I would send books off to New York and they return like little homing pigeons, and agents would say, sorry, I'd love to represent your book, but I only ever represent American authors, because they didn't know Alaska was part of America. Yeah, I did. I got a letter that said exactly that.
Wow.
And then my second thriller didn't do very well, so that was definitely a pit. But
Well, that must have been hard, right? Because the first one won the Edgar Award. Isn't your very first one win the big prize?
Well, that was my crime fiction, first crime fiction novel. Yeah, that was definitely a peak, and it was a considerable shock too. My editor called. Literally, this is what happened, almost verbatim. She called and she said, Dana, you've been nominated for an Edgar. And I said, great, what's an Edgar? I mean, I didn't know. I really did not know. And she's, was considerably taken aback. She lives in New York, she's very intimate. She's with all of the crime fiction stuff. And so, of course, she knew all about this. And she said, it's like the Oscars of the mystery world. She said, Dana, you know what the Oscars are, right? Because at this point, she wasn't sure that I knew anything.
I grew up on a boat. We didn't have a TV, okay?
Yeah. So, and then I had to go to New York, and I had to pretend I knew how to act in a ballroom with a bunch of people, dressed like they'd just come off the set of Dynasty. I've never seen more tuxes per square foot in my whole entire life. And then I won, and I pretty much left my body at that point. People come up to me even now today and say, oh yeah, I remember I met you at the Edgars, and I've only ever been to one Edgar. And, and it's, I don't know, I never saw him before in my life, as far as I know. There's one woman I met in the bathroom, and and she's got like chapter and verse. I'm kind of surprised she didn't know what I did in the stall. I don't remember her for the life of me. I don't know if you could call that a pit or a peak, really. And then, the writer's life is all the writer's life is up and down. I mean, the entire process of writing is up and down. I mean, when I first began a book, you could definitely label that a pit. You're just staring at a blank screen with an equally blank mind. That I stole that line from Gene Webster, Daddy Longlegs. And it's just, you think to yourself, what makes me think I can do this again? Really? Haven't I said everything I am going to say? And I'm now just going to repeat myself, and who's going to want to read that? And it takes a long time to work through that. But what you do is you sit your butt down in a chair, you put your hands on the keyboard, and you write X amount of words or pages, however you count it, paragraphs for that matter, sentences, I don't care, something every day. And eventually you look behind you and you have a document or close to it, and you think to yourself, well, okay, that's not too bad. And then you go away and you leave it alone for a while, and then you come back to it, and then you think, oh my God, this is the worst thing anybody's ever written in the English history of the English language. I'm not good. But then you dig into it and you do the rewrite, because rewriting is the single most important thing that you do. And you get to the end of it and you think, well, okay, that's not too terrible. And you send it off, you make your deadline, hallelujah, by the skin of your teeth, and you send it off, and then it comes back from the copy editor, and oh my God, that is the worst. You think you've written a halfway decent book, wait till the copy editor gets a hold of it. And it's just, I mean, the whole process is peaks and valleys and pits and peaks, and there's just no getting away from it. It's part of the job, and you just get accustomed to it. It's like, I think to myself, yeah, I've been here before. Keep going, Dana.
Now you were, I think, now help me if I've got this right, but I think the story goes, that you went to college and then you traveled around, you worked at like North Slope during the pipeline or for BP or something like that. And then when you hit 30 is when you decided to give it a go as a writer. And did you give yourself a timeline to be able to, do it? I mean, you really just sort of jumped, didn't you? Were you ever doing two things, a day job and then writing, or did you just decide?
No, I committed. I absolutely committed. I'd saved up some money from my job on the slope, and I thought, okay, it's time to fish or cut bait. Can I do this or not? And I needed to kickstart myself back into writing to where I was back before, during, and after college, undergraduate degree college. And so they just started the MFA program at UAA. And so I jumped into that feet first, and I wanted to get through it as soon as I could. It re-taught me how to write on deadline and how to research, which are two of the single most important things you can do as a writer, in my opinion. And I hustled through it as fast as I could, got out the other end, and then spent, let me see, I graduated in 85. I think I started sending out stuff to New York before then. And it took about, what was it? I think 5 years. Yeah, it was the January I got back from Hedgebrook. I was at Hedgebrook in October of 1989. And the January I got back from Hedgebrook, I sold my first book.
So now explain, first of all, people who might not be in the loop of writing retreats, what Hedgebrook is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've told the story so many times, I automatically assume everybody knows what I'm talking about. Okay, Hedgebrook is the first woman retreat for women writers in the world. There's many writers retreats, but most of them are mixed gender. Almost all of them are. And Nancy Nordoff, who inherited wealth from her timber baron dad, had a friend who was a writer who was named Cheryl Feldman. She wrote an excellent book called A Midwife Story. No, it was Penny Armstrong. I'm sorry. Anyway, so Cheryl Feldman, who is a friend of Penny Armstrong, said to Nancy, why don't you build a retreat strictly for women writers? So Nancy did. She bought a farm on Whidbey Island in Puget Sound, and she built, she used the farmhouse buildings for the administration buildings and for the kitchen and the dining area for the writers every night, and then built 6 cottages. And by a miracle, I actually got in the first year. So I'm a plank. We actually watched the 6th cottage go up. And it was a revelation to me. It's the first time anybody acted around me like writing was a real job. When I got up to help clear the table the first night, Nancy looked at me and said, sit down. You've already done your work for today. This is a novel idea to me because at that point, everybody I knew, all of my friends, all of my relatives, my poor father, were looking at me like I was a double trunked elephant at the zoo. They just, who was this odd person? And what was she thinking of doing? Leaving a fabulous job at the Slope, great benefits, terrific salary, and going back to school and deciding she's going to become a writer, starting from scratch all over again. And then I got to Hedgebrook and my entire perception of myself changed. It gave me confidence and, validation. And as I told Nancy, they invited me back for the 25th anniversary of Hedgebrook. And I told Nancy, everything good happened after Hedgebrook. And it's true that some of those things might have happened anyway, but honestly, Hedgebrook had its effect. So I stumbled into this land deal down here in Homer, and I thought, okay, what about building a Hedgebrook North? And so I did, and it's called Story Knife. And everybody, all you women, you need to apply.
And it's you've got I know. Well, I feel bad because I feel like I want to make sure that there's people that might not have an opportunity to take a month to write or something. Of course, I could use it to just an out of reality moment to really pay attention. So now Story Knife you've got 6 cabins. It's sort of the same kind of model as Hedgebrook, right?
Mm-hmm. It's 6 cabins, not 6 cottages. I mean, Hedgebrook is like art in architecture. I mean, we're much more Alaskan and, not quite so arty, very attractive, very beautiful. You can't beat the setting, but not quite as fancy. We're not Post and Boom or Post and I forget.
I don't know. I've seen the pictures. It looks pretty nice.
It's Hedgebrook is amazing. It's just absolutely a glory to the eyes. And of course they've been, in business for over 30 years now, and they've had plenty of time to pretty the place up. We'll get there.
Well, I think it looks pretty good from the pictures, all that I've seen of it.
Well, I think so too.
Yeah, it's nice. The little stoves and the chairs.
We have writers coming 11 days from today. Our first writers for 2022. Our first residents come on April 1st. That's 11 days from today.
Do you have? I see a note here. I'm not very good at reading chats and looking, but I just saw part of it. But I think it might be a thought about. Do you have like the ideal Story Knife client, or whatever we call it, guest or writer? Is there sort of a perfect candidate or?
No, there isn't. That's one thing that I have been insistent on from the beginning, and so far anyway, that what I want is driving what we get. And everybody submit that. The most important, there are many important parts of it. And of course we pay attention to all of them, but the single most important thing is the work. You submit the work, and everybody submits a piece of their writing. And that is what gets your toe in the door. Every resident who comes to Story Knife writes her way here, one word at a time. That's how it works at Hedgebrook.
And so how big a piece do they submit? Is it short pieces?
I think it's no more than and also, Heather, it depends on what you write too, because we are, I want us to be as inclusive and eclectic a community as humanly possible. There's no point in trying to encourage women writers to build a community if they don't come from every part of that community. You wouldn't believe what I went through trying to get people to know women writers from, like the Directors Guild of America and the Screenwriters Guild of America and the Playwrights Guild from New York City, trying to get all those people aware that this place was here for them and that they needed to apply. Mm-hmm. So that is also, I want the people around the table to be poets. I want them to be novelists. I want them to be, they write essays.
It sounds like,
everything, screenplays, plays, everything. It's very, very important. I mean, it would be really boring if all you had was 6 novelists sitting around a table. And I say that speaking as the voice of experience, because I've been to far too many conferences where there are only crime fiction writers sitting around a table, and it puts me to sleep every time.
Well, okay, so you're a crime fiction writer and you're not putting me to sleep in spite of daylight savings time and being a little groggy. My why crime fiction? Because I know you started out science fiction. So why did you decide to pick crime?
I wish I could say I did it on purpose. Ha ha, very funny. Uh, I was writing science fiction at the time, and I'd finished the second book, and I have no background in the hard sciences, so I was exhausted from all the research that I was doing. And at the time, for whatever reason, I was reading a bunch of mysteries. I mean, like literally cleaning out the shelves of the mystery section in the library and
Right,
bringing
and
them
you
home to
said
read.
that as a kid in the library, where are you down in Seldovia, Nikiski?
No,
Where-
this was Anchorage.
when you were
This
when
is
you're
like-
little, like, you read all the Nancy Drews and you
Oh,
went
yeah,
to the
yeah.
library, and so you liked that. I mean, but
Well, I
lots
did
of
that,
people
you know, I
do.
stopped, but I stopped reading mysteries. I mean, I didn't get back into mysteries until my 20s. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that's a
So
whole.
you
nother
wrote one.
conversation.
So then you wrote one after the science fiction.
Well,
just
and then
accidentally?
I wrote a crime fiction novel for fun in between, because I was going to write a third science fiction novel. And I knew I already had it lined out and plotted and everything, but I was exhausted from all the research. And so I thought, I'll just take some time off and I'll write a mystery. And that's what I called it too. That was the official name of it, Mystery. Didn't even have a title. God.
And this is the first Kate Shugak, right?
Yep.
Cold Day. Is it a Cold Day for Murder? Is that-
Cold Day for Murder.
Wow. So, okay. So when you do this, right? I'm just thinking as a writer, and you sit down and I'm just going to write a mystery for fun. Go back to your first one. Do you just like start like you say in all your advice, which is also, there's a lot of stuff. If you haven't been to Dana's website, it's really fun to read her blogs, and they're very informative, and you can see your journalism background like leaping across the page. But 7 things to do if you're gonna write a mystery. I mean, dead body and then go. But I mean, did you did you like sit down and outline it out, or do you just sort of start and say, now I'm going to kill somebody, and where is she going to be, and who's my and then just let it go and then go back and edit it afterwards? Or do you have it all, especially the first one? Was it very plotted?
Well, no, it wasn't really plotted. I had recently been at the Wrangell St. Elias Park, and I remembered that, and that was the summer before that I wrote this, and wrote Kate 1. And
is that how you
I had-
label them in your head? Kate 1, Kate 2?
Yeah. That's how and like ISIS 2, and yeah, that's
You know why? Like
shorthand.
have to be A, B, C, D, E, right?
That's how they are arranged on my in my file on my laptop too.
Okay.
I know what it means.
Oh, good to know.
Anyway, so I went to the Wrangell St. Elias Park because my aunt was working for a bush pilot up there, and she'd quit her job, and she asked me to come up and help her move. She back to Cordova. So I did that. And she, of course, introduced me to all the wonderful characters around there. And something I noticed about all the characters, they, to a man, woman, and child, hated the Park Service.
So
And
were you
I
in
thought-
McCarthy, or were you?
Yeah,
in
yes.
or-
I actually Long Lake, which is like just before McCarthy.
Oh.
I mean, it's not even really a community. It's just like, a group of,
Yeah.
people living sort of more or less within proximity. Anyway, so I noticed that everybody hated the Park Service. And so I look back now and I understand that I always start with a setting. And then I think about the people who live there, and I imagine what, trouble they can get up to. And that's how I come to a plot. And that's exactly what I did with Kate 1. And the obvious victim was going to be the person everybody hated, who was a Park Service ranger. Sorry, NPS.
I know you're laughing about this, but it's true. I guess if they're your writing, you gotta off somebody, so might as well pick the person that everybody whatever. Anyway, go ahead.
That was it. He was the natural victim. And I listened to a lot of old farts talking while I was there, and I faithfully remembered how they felt and the kind of language that they used and the things that they were mad about, and just sort of recreated that scene. And Kate is an Aleut because I was raised with Aleut, more properly called Sugpiaq nowadays, over in Seldovia. And, they say, write what you know. And basically you write what you know because it's the lazy woman's way to write a mystery. So, and that you can know anything. You just have to research it. You can write about anything. You just have to research it. It's not like I've ever been to Mars.
No, or ancient Egypt for that matter. Or
Yeah.
I've never even been to modern Egypt, but did you go to Egypt at all
I
to
did. I
search
did. In
the ice?
between writing the first and second ISIS novels, I went to Egypt, skated into Egypt just before COVID.
Mhm. Wow. Okay, so I'm going back to this now. So when you're writing this first early mystery, then did you have any kind of template, any kind of thing that they talk about in trying to write a mystery where, the certain page turners, a certain group of characters that, this has to happen and that has to happen, and there's this little subplot. Did you have it outlined out at all?
Nope.
Okay, so
I think I
you do
had,
that now?
I mean, I can't even remember, honestly, Heather, I can't remember exactly how I wrote that book. It was just for fun.
Yeah.
It was for fun. It was an exercise more than it was anything else. And I didn't know any writers at that time. I hadn't been to Hedgebrook. I hadn't ever been to a Bouchercon or a Left West Crime, or certainly not an Edgar Awards dinner. And I didn't know how to do, I'd read a bunch of mysteries. I just enjoyed them. I hadn't really,
Right.
like taken them apart piece by piece to see why they worked or why they didn't. I was just kind of, enjoying myself, really. And I didn't try to sell it to anybody either. I mean, I just like finished it and saved it.
So then, and now tell this story, because I've heard you tell this before about how it actually got out in the world, what happened.
Well, I sold my first science fiction novel, and my editor said in that wonderful way that editors do, "What else have you got, Dana?" And, no writer, if an editor, traditional editor says something like that to them, you don't want to say nothing. So basically it was, be right back, and went back, and, I'm climbing through my computer, and things were vastly confused at that moment because I had just changed computers and I just ported everything over into the new one. Back in the day when you had to pay somebody to do that because there was no easy way. And I mean, eventually I stumbled over this file, which looked a little large, called Mystery. I looked at it and I thought, well, that's not terrible. And at least I don't have to say nothing. So I sent it to her and she bought it.
Wow. Okay. So fast forward a little bit. Now you're on, what are you doing? The 21st, Kate? Is that what's next?
Kate 23.
23. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't read as fast as you can write them. So here's a question.
Mhm.
Now that you're on 23, I'm assuming that writing a series is very different than just that first one, and that you've got to kind of plot them and go, and that there's a big difference when you're knowing that it's a continuum. Is there or not?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of backstory, and you can't, after 23 books in, you cannot pay attention to every detail in every novel, but some attention must be paid to things that have happened in your character's past, in my opinion. Some writers, particularly older crime fiction writers, more traditional crime fiction writers, don't pay any attention to backstory at all. It's like, it's almost like some of these stories are happening simultaneously in the character's life. But I have always liked stories where people grow and change for the good or for the bad. And so that's why I write.
Now, what's your daily schedule for writing? I mean, obviously you're pretty disciplined to do this.
I get up every morning and go to work. I have coffee, I have breakfast, I do my
And
stretch.
like work is like you walk across the kitchen to the dining room table, or do you go to
No,
an office?
I have an office.
At home or
I'm
separate?
sitting in it right now. Yes, at home.
At
yeah.
home. So you have a home office, and what time of day is the most productive time?
Mornings are my most productive time. Although, there are times when life just kicks you in the teeth and you got to do something else. There's a lot of business that you have to do, that is attendant on being a professional writer. And sometimes my work gets pushed back to the afternoon or the evening. And then when I really get going on the book, I tend to be just a little bit rude about people who try to infringe on my work time. And I'll be working straight through the day and into the night until I get it done. There's a time when you get to the top of the mountain and everything's laid out in front of you, and there's been this incredible slog in back of you to get to the top. And all you want to do is get to the end. And man, that's when I'm going. I'm just galloping toward the end.
How long does it take you typically from the beginning of the pit and where am I going to go till the end of a manuscript that's ready to turn into like to be published even, let's say the publication, and what's that timeline like?
It's not, it depends on the book, and it depends on how long that book is, and how long it takes, how many pages it takes to tell that particular story. Though Not Dead took me a year to write because one of the characters decided to go off and have a life of his own. How dare he? That, I then had to include in the narrative. So there were 3 narratives instead of my planned 2 narratives. So that added a tremendous amount of time, but it's also my favorite book, so I have no complaints.
Okay, so I was going to ask you that about a favorite book. So which title is your favorite one?
Though Not Dead. That's
Though
my
Not
favorite Kate. It's my favorite Kate Shugak novel. Yeah.
Okay. And so that's the favorite one. I'm gonna go look at it again. Do you have one that you're still amazed that it got published that you like the least, or do you not have any ones that you kind of wish you could pull back again?
I mean, there's some that I like less,
Mhm.
but or not as much as Though Not Dead. But I don't think I'm ashamed or embarrassed yet of anything
Mhm.
that I've written. I'm trying to think. God, there's 23 books in the series. Heather, and I'm trying to run the titles through my head. Half of them I can't even remember what they're about. So
Well, how did the switch? How did you end up deciding even that, like, Liam Campbell got his own series? He's for those of you that aren't as familiar, Liam's the trooper, the tall, dark, and the hero trooper that is in the Kate books, and then he moves over and gets his own. How did that happen?
he's not in the Kate books.
He
The Kate
isn't?
books have their own trooper.
So
Liam
it's
is
a different trooper. Different wasn't
Liam
there.
is
Liam
a
is
different
separate.
trooper.
Oh, sorry,
And
that's
I can tell you right away that, again, I wish this had been my idea, but my editor called me and said, when are you going to write me about that book about Chopper Jim? And who's the trooper in
he's okay. Yeah,
the
he's the
series.
trooper in Kate.
And
Yeah.
I had my own. I didn't, again, when an editor calls and says something like that to you, you don't want to say something like, oh, well, I can't write about him separately. I have plans for him in the Kate Shugak series. No, you don't want to say that. No. So what I did was I sat down and I wrote a proposal for 3 Liam Campbell novels. And I sent it to my agent and said, Laura Ann asked for this, send it to her. And I got a contract off of that. It wasn't even my idea. She just wanted a series about an Alaska State Trooper.
Dan, I'm listening to you and you're saying, you can't when your editor calls and says you have something, you don't say nothing, you find something. And then when they want, and I think right there, that is the key to your success, because a lot of us might say, I don't think I have something. And they might say,
don't say that.
I wonder. I know. And you're so this is good advice to writers. You're saying, like, just come up with something here, because if somebody wants to publish something, you go, rather than say wait till you have the perfect inspiration or the
you can, I mean, I've had plenty of false starts, Heather. I don't mean to say that everything I've written turns to gold, because it doesn't. I have plenty of short stories. I have plenty of thinking that might grow later into something larger. That often happens with writers. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody on this Zoom call that, but yeah, I think nowadays, don't they call that fake it until you make it? So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, people would argue that you're not faking it. You really are working it. Do you have any time of the year when you're not writing? Like, do you say to yourself, like, this month or summer, or a couple seasons that you just always just sort of take off to travel or to garden or to do something, or is it always part of your day 365 days a year?
I'm always writing, but I do take time. One of the things, this is something that I always tell aspiring authors too. I think it's very important to take time off between finishing a rough draft and doing the rewrite. Get away from it. If you can, take a week or even 2 before you go back to the rewrite, and so that you look at it with fresh eyes. And that that rewriting process, if you leave, God, you know, if I'm writing just an article for somebody, if or somebody invites me to do a blog post or something, I will try to get it done at least a day or two before the deadline, so I can just leave it, and then the day before it's due,
Fix it.
go back and look at it and see immediately everything that I did wrong, and do the rewrite and send it in as a much better piece of work.
Mhm. Do you have, do you work closely with an editor at a publishing house, or do you have friends that help
I
you
have
with the?
I
the
have
second
an
read?
I have an editor that an independent editor that I hire.
Really? So
Yeah.
you've got somebody that you trust that you go back and forth with before you send it further?
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
I think, could you talk a little about that, that relationship and that process for people who might not
I
be aware of how that works?
it's the second such editor I have had. And the first one was an editor that I'd worked with before, when I was still totally traditionally published. In other words, you know, in New York, like,
Mhm.
God, I can't even remember the name of my own, Macmillan, and or Putnam before it was Random Penguin.
Yeah.
The s- so I knew that this editor had left her house, and so I got in touch with her. I still had her email address, and I said, "Can I hire you to do this?" And so she did for a while, but then she got into writing her own books, and the edits were not coming back as arduously edited as I need them to be. So I knew someone else who was an acquisitions editor for a house, and she worked very closely. I'd heard her stories for many years about working really closely with authors that she acquired for the house that she worked for.
Mhm.
And I said, "Hey, would you take this on?" And she said, "Yeah." So I have to have an editor who's not afraid of me. I have to. I'm not a weak person, and um, I I need someone who says, "Dana, this sucks. Redo it."
No, yeah, I've had the benefit of working with great editors all the way through. Anytime from radio stuff to newspaper, things at the old Daily News to, all of my books have had the same editor. I just live kind of in panic for when eventually she leaves, I'm waiting that this happens. But I mean, it's just been very lucky for me.
Mhm.
And I often feel like the relationship between the writer and the editor, it's collaborative in a way. And you mentioned the copy editor. There's a bunch of people behind the scenes that help bring out the best in what I do. And I don't know if people who haven't been in that process or is aware of that, how all that works. And and
I
the
think
value
many,
of it.
I think there are many writers in the beginning who don't understand the entire process. It's arduous. Oftentimes feels endless,
Mhm.
but it's necessary. All of it, every
And
step.
so what would you say to somebody who said, well, wait a minute, like I wrote this and it's just how it ought to be. And I think it's great. Now this person's telling me that it won't be, and I'm going to hold out until I get it, exactly what I have out in the world.
You can do that. You can self-publish. You can publish on Amazon. You can publish, there are small press publishers all over the place, but the small press publishers have editors too.
Mhm.
Um, but so
I guess here, like, yeah, when I guess,
everybody's heard of Stephen King.
right.
Everybody's heard of Stephen King's The Stand.
Mhm.
His publisher cut, I don't know how many pages from The Stand, and then published it the way they wanted it published, the way they thought it should be published. And of course, Stephen King, being Stephen King, could afford to go ahead and publish the entirety of his original version himself. And I'm not a big reader of Stephen King. I don't read a lot of horror. I was so terrified by The Shining that was it for me. I was never going to read him again. Anyway, so I asked friends who had read both versions, and they said by far and away, the version that his publisher published was better than his own. And I've always wanted, if I had the guts, if I ever met the guy, if I had the guts, I would love to talk to him about that, to see, if it hadn't, I just love to know what he thought about that, because he has to know that himself. He has to. He's a really smart guy. I've read his book on writing.
So like what's the best part for you of having an editor, and why do you you know, even now at your own expense, hiring one. I mean, what would you tell people about what the value of that is, and why do
The-
people try it?
God, I mean, it's almost, I- it's invaluable. I mean, there's no price that can be put on it. A good editor's price is far above rubies. They will point out all the holes, the plot holes, in your narrative that you didn't notice you could drive a semi tractor trailer through. They
Mhm.
will, call out where you use the passive voice. Oh, for them. They will, the first editor is the one that you want critique of content. And the most important thing is to find an editor that knows how to criticize constructively as opposed to destructively, because a destructive critic will it'll break a writer. I know writers it has broken, and I'm not going to name any names. And it's up to you. It's really up to the writer to decide, is this editor bringing something of value to my work? And to make the decision to, okay, accept those criticisms, incorporate them into the manuscript or not. There were often times working with an editor when I just didn't agree with what they said, and so I wouldn't incorporate it into the manuscript. But most of the time, God, the very first Kate Shugak novel, my editor, the first experience I ever had with an editor made me cut the first chapter of A Cold Day for Murder. And of course, she called me up, and I look back now and her voice was a little shaky. She was scared to say this to me. And I mean, I wasn't anybody at that point. I mean, it wasn't like I had God, I was going to be happy if they spelled my name correctly on the cover. Anyway, so I got off the phone and I was just steaming with rage. How could she, this had to be like deathless prose. And who was she to say this is like leads into the rest? And so I went to bed that night and I was still mad. I woke up the next morning and the first thing I thought was, she's right. I went back and I looked, and the first chapter had nothing to do with the rest of the book. So I cut it. It was the smartest thing I ever did. That's the book that went on to win the Edgar, guys.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I think I've had, I like my little book, Find the Good, my little yellow book that's so short. The original manuscript was 70,000 words. And then they thought, this would be fun if it was a really small book. Let's cut it to 25. And I mean, it was like the hardest thing I ever did. I almost gave back the contract. I'm like, I can't. I'm just used to more stuff. And they're like, nope, we're just going to distill it down. Just keep going, just keep going. I felt like maybe how poets feel, but it was, they just decided that it was going to be a small book, and we're going to do it like that. And could you do it? And I'm like, I guess so. And I'm like you, like, okay. I said, yes. I didn't of course I cried. I banged my head on the table. I cursed, for like a day. And then I was like, all right, let's start this process. But it was good for me, because it helped me to be more direct and less waffly. And, I couldn't equivocate about this and that. I just had to say it because there wasn't.
It's a great book, Heather.
Well, yeah, but it was a hard one to write because of the change in the structure with an editor. But I'm glad I stuck with it. But there were moments when I thought I might not. But
it's always, any editing process with a good editor worthy of the name, is a learning process. I'm still learning.
Yeah, I think I've learned most about writing from the different, and this includes, my very first experience with George Bryson at the Anchorage Daily News, and he was just so wonderful to me. You want to write a column? I was like, sure. I said yes. And I said, I don't know how. And he goes, well, you just send me your columns 2 weeks ahead of the deadline, and then we'll go back and forth a few times. And we did that for like the first 6 months until I got the hang of it, and then gradually my deadlines got a little shorter. But it's like what you say, that habit of don't turn in the first thing. The first thing,
God,
right,
don't do that. Don't ever do that.
Maybe wait till the second or third. But the value of editing. I'm wondering though too, do you have friends? Do you have anybody that reads anything?
No.
Or do you just
no, you're probably thinking like a beta reader group. No,
Yeah,
I
or
don't.
something like that. I hear
No.
people do that. I don't either. I'm just curious because I know some people
Yeah,
find it very
it works
helpful.
for, it works for people. Sharon Shin is always thanking her beta readers, and other, like, particularly epic fantasy writers thank their beta readers because they create these immense worlds, I think, and they have to have somebody helping them keep track of all the details.
Yeah, yeah. So if you, we're gonna go, I think we should open up for some questions here because there's people that are asking and there's a chat thing that I don't really know how to figure out, but somebody might.
I'm actually, I'm looking at the chat. If you click on chat, Heather, it opens up to the right.
Thanks, Dana. So, maybe some questions from people that are there that you can answer if you feel like, and if you can see them, Dana, you can just pick ones that you might want
Okay.
to
Well,
answer.
Nancy Lord. Hi, Nancy. Are you home?
She's
Are you right down the road?
I don't know,
No, she's probably muted. And the question for Dana from Nancy is, what are your thoughts about writing with Native characters? There's such an issue today about cultural appropriation. Does that make you hesitate in choosing characters and cultural references? No, it doesn't. I write about Alaska. Alaska Natives are part of Alaska. If I weren't writing about Alaska Natives, I wouldn't be writing about Alaska. I'm very definite about that, I know.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm looking here, some other questions that people might have had. Well, someone has a specific question here about
I
Kate.
see about Kate getting her throat cut.
Yeah, but that.
Okay, in a Kate Shugak novel, I don't know which one. She's sitting across a table at a restaurant with, I think, the DA friend of hers, Brendan McCord, and she tells him the story. But I don't know which book that is. So sorry.
I'm looking, I think I don't see a whole lot of, I don't see really any other questions there that we haven't covered. I guess another question I would have for you is how much of, and this sort of is a follow-up on Nancy's a little bit, and you alluded to it earlier, but how much of your own life is in your books? I mean, like Mutt, like I think, well, this woman must have a dog, and then I read that
I have never,
and you've never owned a dog, and I'm like, how are you so good with this dog? I was a dog person. I'm like, oh, right away, she's got to have a dog. And then there's a lot of cooking. There's a lot of these, stuff that's made in cabins that that the groceries that Kate brings out, or how she makes her biscuits and the grease, and there's these different things that she does that, like, you think, does that come from your own experience? Is that from research, especially a lot of the bush stuff?
Well, the bush stuff, yeah, pretty much comes from, if you can call Seldovia the bush, Seldovia and Cordova. I tend to generalize Alaskan bush communities by those that aren't on a road, basically. So Cordova and Seldovia both qualify. But of course, Seldovia is much smaller. And that's where, I spent, I don't know, I think I was 9 when we moved there, 8 maybe. And then I stayed there until 69 when I graduated from high school, and then went off to college in Anchorage. So yeah, sure, all of that's from that. It's not just, and I was an only child whose mother worked, and she did some cooking, but not a lot. And frankly, most of the home cooking I ate when growing up in Seldovia was Filipino, because my best friend was Aleut Filipino, and I would go over to her house and her dad would cook and I would eat because I'm not a dummy. And so, yeah, I still make adobo today. And so, yeah, I definitely, things that I cook myself wind up in the books. People always love recipes, and I always love writing about cooking. And in particular, writing about Alaskan cooking, which is very different because we eat so much fish and game. And it's fun to do that. And it's also what normal people do. And in spite of the fact that I'm writing about basically heroes, fictional heroes, I want them to be as normal and, of life as possible.
Especially when you get into like all of the books, but as you get more involved in like the state trooper system and everything, there's a lot of pretty technical stuff about the troopers and the helicopters and the rules and the regulations and these crimes and all that stuff. How do you, is that all research? Do you have a friend that's a trooper that helps, or some cops?
Well, I had a friend at the troopers and then she retired. And I made friends with the guys at the Trooper Museum, and I need to go back there because it's been a while. You know, they have a great online presence. They have trooper dispatches that you can read every day from every district in the state. It's pretty much, you know, there for the taking. I used to have a friend, a guy named Eric Gonzalez at the FBI. He was the PR guy for Anchorage FBI, and he was terrific, man. I remember the last time, but he retired too. And so the last time I think I went in there, I forget, I think it was Restless in the Graves plot by him, and he turned white and he leaned forward. His eyes were like the size of salad plates. And he said, Dana, we're worried about that very thing. And then he sent me down to the gun room, and just all you have to do is ask. I mean, I think any people in any job, it doesn't necessarily have to be law enforcement, any job, pilots tell fabulous stories, as good as stories as any cop any day. Just God, you know, when you meet one, encourage them to keep talking and listen.
Right, and I like I read an interview with you where you're talking about the, you know, when I think it's Liam, it may have been Chopper Jim, but the trooper guy that I like jumped out of an airplane, and you
That was
asked
Liam.
if that was like possible, could you jump out of a Super Cub? Right? Was it a Super Cub? So
It was a Super Cub. And when I was starting to write that scene, I called my dad, who was still living at that time. And I said, Dad, could somebody jump out of a Super Cub? And there was this long silence because he was kind of inured to phone calls like this from me now. Right. And he said, why would anyone want to do that? So I explained. There was a big sigh. Okay. And so he basically walked me through it. He also walked me through the first book. He walked me through the herring spotting, but my mother had also herring spotted. So I knew about that from her as well. And I knew I was going to write that into one book at some point sooner or later.
Yeah, and I heard when you spoke at Catch Mike Bay Writers all those years ago, you were talking about reminding Alaskan writers that, you know, what we have is place, is location, and the ways of this place, and it's, you know, whether it's rural, whether it's urban, whatever, we're in like, as you say, almost a foreign country in terms of what the rest of the United States or the world sees as the way.
I don't think that can be repeated enough. I remember I got invited. I was honored by an invitation from Manicottic High School to come and give their high school graduation speech. This was, oh my God, I think in the 90s or certainly very early aughts. So, and they, of course, because they had me there, they had a captive writer. They wanted me to teach some classes. And so I remember this one class that I went into, it seemed to be mostly girls, which I found very strange. And they were, I'd say, all like high school age. And I was talking to them, and one of them said something like, well, you know, why would anybody be interested in reading a story that I wrote? Well, she shouldn't have said that, because then I was off and running. I mean, there was a moose standing out in front of the, you know, the gates to the school on the way up. And I said to her, how many people do you think walk by a moose or drive by a moose on an ATV going to school? I said, how many people drive an ATV to school? I said, your life is exotic. And they all drew back. And I said, no, I said, it is exotic to somebody who's going to school in PS 21 on Manhattan Island. Write for them, write your life for them. I promise you they will love it. I live in hopes that someday one of those kids is going to come up to me and they'll be a grown person and they'll have published 10 books.
Yeah, I know. I was just reading, I've been reading, you know, some of the ladies' #1 detective agency is sort of my antidote to the news, like just something that's different than the horrors of the world. And I said to my husband today, God, I wish we'd like lived in Botswana so I had something interesting to write about. And he's like, you're in Alaska. Like, oh yeah, but this is so normal. I mean, I think, you know, you get to the point where it's like so normal, and then almost you feel like if you're writing about that stuff, it's like cliche Alaska, you know, it's not like the real one. And so,
only a cliche to us.
I know, but that's why, like, always, like, you know, I write about apartments and cars and sidewalks and things in his, because people they think we're all in, you know, cabins in the bush, but it's, you know, bears walk down Main Street, but, you know, there's a cop car behind the bear, you know, with sirens going. It's not the what people imagine the wilderness. Is not all or nothing in these towns that we live in anyway. So anyway, we're getting close. We have like 6 minutes left. So I think, and I'm not going to keep anybody longer because I know everybody's busy. So if anybody has a question, I'm looking I can read the chat because Dana has shown me how to do it. And, if anybody has a question they want to ask, but I can certainly just keep chatting all day to this woman. I think maybe, well, okay, well, while we're waiting anyway. So let's cut to Story Knife. If somebody wants to apply to Story Knife, what do they do? Where do they go? What do they?
Last year, now I
What's
don't
the
run
schedule
Story,
even?
I don't run Story Knife. That Story Knife is run by that wonderful woman, Erin Hollowell.
Who's also
And,
a wonderful poet and who also runs a Catch a Like
exactly. Yes, she's very well known in the state. And she opens up the application period. Last year, she opened up the application period for 2 months, beginning November 1st. So just put that on your calendar and then go to storyknife.org. And on the drop-down menu, you can click and apply.
Okay. I just got a note that Katie Bosler would like to ask a question, has her hand up, and I don't know how to control that. So maybe the people behind the scenes can let Katie say something.
It can click
Hi.
on chat.
Oh,
Hi.
there she is. I hear her
Hello.
voice. Hi, Katie. How's the shoulder?
It's doing all right.
Oh, there she is.
Broke my collarbone a couple weeks ago skiing, so I'm just kind of taking it easy. But anyway, it looks like we all are just about out of time, but I was raising my hand to let people know that I discovered tonight for future reference. If you go to reactions, you can just click on raise your hand, and then it puts a hand there. But it does look like we have a question here. And that's Dana, when you gave our first keynote at Northwards, I think this is from Jeff Brady, you introduced us to Facebook and how important it was for writers to promote themselves on social media. Do you still believe that?
I do, Jeff. Especially if you're going to move toward an independent publishing career, if you're not going to be published by, and even if you are traditionally published. I remember when I got my first book contract, one of the first things I got after the contract was this, oh my God, it must have been a 6-page letter. This is before, in the Stone Ages, before email. And I had to fill out everything that I would do to help promote the book. The promotion of books, I mean, we all see the ads for the big name authors and the big book series, half the time they don't even, the title is in small type and their name is in big type because they know the books will sell themselves. Those fans will buy those books for sure. But the rest of us who labor in the trenches have got, at minimum, to at least to let people know that our books are available to buy. And I don't think that Facebook sells books, but it lets people know that they are available. And if you do your job right on Facebook, you'll give them some idea of what the book's about and they'll decide whether or not they know it or not. So I'm only saying Facebook because Facebook is the interface that I am most used to. I diddle around on Twitter a little bit, but Twitter's where I kind of let myself off the chain and let myself comment about other things. I mean, my website posts repeat on Twitter in the same way that they do on Facebook. But I don't really, I'm not like hardcore promoting the way I am on Facebook. And as far as Instagram is concerned, I post pretty pictures of my flowers every year, and and occasionally a pretty picture of Story Knife, and that's about it. But yeah, to answer your question, Jeff, yeah, I do. I have a fan club. God, I'm embarrassed to say that out loud. And they call themselves the Dana Maniacs, and it's not my fault. They named themselves. And there's about 3,400 of them. They have their own page on Facebook. And I am proud to say that I am a privileged member and I can go in there and post stuff. I try not to do too much of that because it's their page, not my page. So I try to post stuff that they will be interested in. And I think you have to be really careful about promoting online. You can't over promote. You have to find a happy medium where, you're just letting people know. I have a newsletter too, and the newsletter is where the sales come in.
So Dana, can you, before we go here, can you remind people about, we just go, it's just danastavino.com, right?
Oh, yeah, just go, no, it's just stabino.com.
Stabino.com. And
Stabino.com.
there's blogs, there's the links, there's a
And
Facebook
scroll, I'd recommend that everybody, so you know, what I mean, you can do it or not. I'm not gonna die either way. The scroll down to the bottom and subscribe to the newsletter and it'll just show up. And I only, I try really hard not to spam people. So
Mhm.
you'll only ever see, except on publication months, like a newsletter a month.
Yeah.
And you
yeah.
can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I have the same thing, and I alternate between. I'm not, because I'm not, I'm still in the traditional publishing world. I'm not nearly the number of books that you have. It's more like a relationship with people, and I go back and forth with, Facebook, evil media, and I'm sort of the same as you. I have no Twitter, but Instagram gets pictures of my dogs, and the Facebook page gets sort of writerly posts and things that are shared. But I just find people kind of need relationships. There's a lot of lonely people out there, and they read books and they find comfort, and it almost feels like it's
Honestly,
kind of,
I think
and I don't mean lonely in a negative way. I just mean people that are reaching, and if your words make someone want to be your friend on Facebook, that's a real compliment, and you need to kind of
It's
honor that.
also, I also think that there are fewer people reading for pleasure, reading for recreation than there used to be. I mean, it used to be like 10% people. I'm not sure it's that many anymore. I mean, people are all playing Grand Theft Auto instead of reading books. So I think that readers are building communities naturally around writers, definitely not just me, because they are looking for community, like we all are.
Right, I think so. So, and we'll give a shout out to Jeff Brady too, who was here, because the Northwards Writers Conference is coming up in May. He's got some rock.
You should definitely go. That's
Yeah.
fun.
Tony Orange was there and is this year, and there's there's a whole list of them. You can go to the Northwards site and see it. And then Kachemak Bay, of course, is also coming up with
Next month.
again another Jericho Brown, and who I just love, and Victoria Chang. Of course, Obit is her poetry book, so she's near and dear to my heart. It's a great book if you haven't read that. But anyway, I want to thank you, Dana. Thank you. This is fun. I got inspired. Now I'm going to go home and try to write more. Go home. I am home, but maybe tomorrow morning at 6 or whatever time it is when the time change. But thank you so much, and thank you for your work with Story Knife and your leadership there. And thanks for taking the time. I know you're super busy, and it's been great. And I'm going to turn it to Barbara, who's going to say so long for 49 Writers.
Well, thank you both so much. It's been wonderful. And you can tell by the chat, I hope you've had a chance to read it, how grateful people are for you sharing your time tonight. And so we're very grateful to you. And I think I just urge everyone to support further events like this, and also to support Story Knife, which is just an amazing endeavor. I think it's so wonderful that's underway and happening. And if you're a member of 49 Writers, thank you for tonight, because you make things like this happen. If you're not, think about it and go online to our website, 49writers.org. And again, check out our events. There are quite a few things coming up in the spring that I think all of you will find. You'll find something there for you in your writing life. So thank you very much to everyone. It's been a wonderful evening. And Dana, you're awesome. And Heather, you are too.
Don't make me squirm anymore.
Thanks, both of you.
And I just have one real quick to add is the goal is for this to be a monthly series, right, Heather?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. So stay
I'll
tuned.
always talk to somebody.
Stay tuned for the next announcement about a writer's inspiration with Heather and
Yeah, and I would even actually say, if you want to send 49 Writers a little note about who you'd like me to talk to, I'm or who, not me to talk to, but who you'd like to hear more from that I could help facilitate. Let me know, because that's it. I'm all are welcome in different ranges. I just
Sounds good.
we just came here first, so please think about that. Suggestions are welcome.
Awesome. Thank you very much. You could
Bye,
say
everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.